Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This video clip of Julius Malema has been taking the rounds. What I find really disappointing is how some people believe only what they want to hear. Julius Malema is one of those African leaders who, having been given opportunity, the platform to speak, have been making a lot of noise, which has been counterproductive. He hasn't contributed anything. If anything at all, it has made Africa worse. Because here is an individual who does not respect facts. It's just an empty drum that makes a lot of noise. I'll just play a short clip of what he said.
And the trouble of Zimbabwe is caused by Mugabe is not true. Who caused the problem of Syria? Who caused the problem of Libya? Who's causing the problem of Venezuela, Afghanistan, and Iraq? All those problems were caused by Mugabe. Destabilizing those countries were caused by Mugabe. What is common with all these countries, including Zimbabwe, is the fact that imperialism intervened. And we always know that when imperialism intervenes, it destabilizes countries, and those countries never recover from imperialist intervention. That's what Zimbabwe is suffering from. When they took their land, when they took their economy, the imperialists imposed sanctions on them. We challenge imperialism, lift the sanctions, and let's see if black people will never run a successful economy. Let the black Zimbabweans fail on their own without imperialism sanctions. We want the sanctions in Zimbabwe removed.
This is just nonsense. In 1980, when Zimbabwe gained its independence, the elections that year, 1980, Robert Mugabe and his Zanu PF colleagues attended the Lancaster House that came up with the new constitution. It was agreed at the Lancaster House that Zanu PF and PF Zapu would withdraw its freedom fighters from the field during the campaign period. They will be withdrawn to assembly points. It is a historic fact that Robert Mugabe and his colleagues left many of their freedom fighters in the field. And their campaign message to the people of Zimbabwe was that if Zanu PF does not win the election, the Bush War would continue. Of course, the people voted to end the Bush War, not knowing that they were losing their right, their fundamental right to a meaningful say in the governance of the country. A right they've never regained. Julius Malema should tell us what sanctions had been imposed then. What imperialist intervention had happened at that point. Other countries like South Africa have managed to hold free, fair, and credible elections, which he himself, as one of the leaders of the opposition parties, has never complained as having been rigged. Why is it that South Africa was able to do it and Zimbabwe failed to do it? Simple. Robert Mugabe and his colleagues had no intention of holding free, fair, and credible elections. They viewed giving the people the right to a meaningful say in the governance of the country as a threat to their hold on absolute power. They could not accept, they could not stomach that. Some people have argued that no, it was just a campaign gimmick. They were not going to reignite the Bush War if Zanu PF had lost. Well, they did reignite the war because in 1983, Zanu PF launched the Gukurahundi massacre. The primary purpose of the Gukurahundi massacre was to force the only other political party that constituted a serious challenge to Zanu PF's hold on power, PF Zapu, to give up its existence as an independent party, which they finally did in 1987 with the signing of the PF Zapu Zanu PF Unit Accords. And that cleared the way for the imposition of the de facto one-party state that has ruled Zimbabwe to this day. What sanctions had been imposed at that point? What Western imperialist intervention can you point to justify Gukurahundi? It's all nonsense. We have got people like Julius Malema who want to speak on issues that they don't understand or they've got very little understanding of. Zimbabwe has the misfortune of having corrupt, incompetent, and tyrannical thugs like Robert Mugabe as the founding fathers. Unlike South Africa, that had the visionary Nelson Mandela as their founding father. Much as some people may not appreciate it, but the truth of the matter is the greatest gift that Nelson Mandela gave to the people of South Africa was a democratic foundation. South Africa has had many challenges, and I'll be the first one to admit it. But it has managed, ever since 1994, to steer a democratic path. The rights and freedoms of the South African people have been respected ever since 1994. And I think this has been the saving grace for South Africa. Zimbabwe is a failed state because we've been stuck with a corrupt, incompetent, and tyrannical Zanu PF dictatorship. We've not been able to remove it from power because the regime rigged the elections. In 2024, last year, South Africans went to the poll. Their disappointment with the ruling party, ANC, was justified. And the election results made sure that that disappointment was expressed in the popular vote. ANC lost its majority, something that Zanu PF would have never tolerated. That would have never happened in Zimbabwe. Because Zanu PF has imposed a de facto one-party state. To try to blame the West imperialists and the sanctions for Zimbabwe's problems has been a convenient scapegoat for the ruling party Zanu PF. Why should the imposition of sanctions justify the rigging of the elections? Even now, SADC and the AU condemned Zimbabwe's 2023 elections as flawed, and yet we are supposed to blame it on sanctions. Why should the ordinary Zimbabweans be denied their right to a meaningful say in the governance of the country? Because those in power have quarreled with the British, the Americans, etc. What have they got to do with it? And yet this is what we are being told here. I think as a Zimbabwean, one has got to reject this kind of argument with the contempt it rightly deserves. Zanu PF has rigged elections. Has denied the people of Zimbabwe a meaningful say in the governance of the country. And this is why Zimbabwe is a failed state. Let's address the problem and stop giving these regimes scapegoats to justify rigging the elections. ANC in their party conference in 2022 made a party resolution that they would not allow regime change in Zimbabwe. And everybody understood what that meant. They knew that Zanu PF had failed to hold free, fair, and credible elections and was likely to do the same come 2023. And the ANC was making it abundantly clear that if Zanu PF should rig the elections, they would back them up because they don't want to allow regime change in Zimbabwe. A green light to Zanu PF because Mnangagwa did indeed go ahead and rig the elections. And while SADC and the AU election observer condemned the process. And many of the African leaders failed to attend Mnangagwa's inauguration, including some of the leaders within the region itself, SADC. President Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa and a high-powered ANC delegation attended the inauguration. Why? Because they wanted to endorse that view that sanctions could justify, the imposition of the sanctions justifies Zanu PF rigging the elections. A foolish idea. We need to start looking at facts and analyzing them correctly. Just because you have got the megaphone doesn't give you the right to talk nonsense. And people like Julius Malema should be told in no uncertain term that he is just an empty drum that makes a lot of noise. Mugabe was a dictator, a ruthless dictator, corrupt, incompetent, and he destroyed Zimbabwe. To blame it on white imperialists is nonsense. Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.